we know technology is constantly evolving, and you may be more dependent on it than what you think. There is lots of suggestion that tech rots our brains, or maybe that's just something parents say to keep kids off screens. Dr. Jo Lukens is with me to dish the truth about tech today. Dr. Jo, is tech really giving us brain rot?
Well, it's a catchy phrase, and it's one that might be familiar for some of the parents out there who are listening, but of course we know there's no diagnosis of brain rot per se, but when we're talking about that, we're talking about those very real concerns that people have about heavy digital use and how that affects our attention, our memory, our mood, our social interactions, all of those things. So we know that constant exposure to all of those things is generally not great for us.
Yeah, what are some of the genuine cognitive downsides of too much screen time?
It's about what you're doing, and it's about when you're doing it, and it's going to be no surprises that we say particularly when it's late at night. And we know that what happens is when we have a considerable amount or excessive amounts of screen time, that does impact us in terms of how well we concentrate, how well we process information, our memory. But it also does things like it disrupts our sleep and the flow-on effects then for our learning and mood. So if too much screen time is never going to be a good thing, and it generally, most of us have probably even noticed if we've had that, we've noticed what those impacts might be for us.
Does it look different at different ages, this excessive screen time type?
It does, and partly that's because of the developmental stages of the brain at different points in time and what we're doing at different points in our lifespan as well. So we do know that the younger brains are more sensitive to some of the balances between the real world and that online world, and we certainly don't want, it's not ideal at all for particularly our younger ones, younger children. So there's been some research that shows it can slow things down, like language development and some of the social functioning, those sorts of things are negatively impacted with that high levels of screen time.
So we know that mostly it has downsides. Are there any upsides?
Yes, there is. And I think that's why I'm so glad that we're talking about this today, because the tendency is to just throw it in the it's terrible basket. Yes. And so there's certainly, with all of these things, it's about how we use them and whether we are making great choices for ourselves in terms of how we use them. But we know, of course, it can help with our learning. It gives us good access to information, and what it can also do is it can free up a lot of mental space by automating some of the things that we do, so we can engage in some of the things that are more complex, which is what our brain is really great at doing. So certainly plenty of upside to tech and to the social media. Again, it's all about being savvy about how we use it.
Yeah, having some tactics and rules in place, maybe.
Yes, rules.
Yes, rules. You've used the phrase tech hygiene before. What does that look like in everyday life?
Yeah, so if you don't like rules, let's call them boundaries. But we're essentially talking about the same thing. But it might be saying, well, look, what works best for me? And it might be that I don't get on tech in the hour or two before going to bed. We know certainly that's not a great time for it, and if you can charge your phone away from your bed and those sorts of things, and then you've just got to work out how you're going to get up in the morning. So if you need maybe you can buy an old-fashioned alarm clock. But we do know also, things you can make decisions about is how often do you get notified on elements? Do you have tech-free meals by yourself or with the family, rather than just constantly scrolling, because it's that constant scrolling, and particularly when it's those short video pieces that obviously people find so interesting, but what we do is that has a significant impact on our ability to process information and to attend to different things.
Yeah. Specifically around kids using screens, for parents who are listening, what are some of those sorts of things that we should be conscious of?
So with little ones and the infants, we want to keep the screens away from them as best we can, and that doesn't mean you don't maybe have some interesting thing for the children to listen to, but it's the actual getting fixated on the screens that obviously is a big part of that problem. Limiting the time is going to be another thing as well, and dare I say it, it's also about what we show our children that we do. So it's one thing to say to the children you can only have so much tech time, but if we're constantly on it, I read one recent study that I thought was interesting that actually said sometimes going out in nature increases tech time for people, which sounds counterintuitive in some ways, but what some people do is by the time they get out there they get bored, and so then they're sitting on the beach, but they're actually not, instead of looking at
scrolling,
instead of watching the big screen in front of them of the world, they're looking at the little screen in front of them. So
it's interesting, isn't it? So if somebody is listening right now and they feel a little bit frazzled, what's one small change that they could make this week?
Yeah, so I think a tech reset is probably a good way to go. So it might be, and you've got to plan it. So you might say, well, I'm going to, in the afternoons, I'll make up a time, 30 minutes, say, when I don't actually physically touch my phone. So as long as there's no one who you're expecting a call from that you need to deal with that, you might want to spending time with others is obviously another good example of things that we might do there. And I think the thing that helps with it is to know what you're going to do instead. Yeah. So it might be, I'm not going to be on my phone at lunchtime because I'm going to read my book, and so then that then means you have to have your book with you. But I think it's the planning. It's not just, well, I won't. What are you going to do instead of? Because then we tend to get lost, and when we get lost and we can't think of what to do, then the default is that many people will just head straight back onto their phones.
Yeah. And I think it's also, I've found even when I go out to lunch with people, if people have their phones up the right way, they're so very interested in whatever notification is popping up. So I like to just flip my phone over so that I'm not tempted to go, oh, what's more important than the person who's right in front of me?
Yeah, that is such a great strategy, because you're right, the out of the corner of your eye distractions will still significantly distract you. And I saw a really interesting piece that for those that, to have their phones nearby when they're working, or students when they're studying, is the mere presence of your phone is a distraction, even if you've got it on airplane mode. So to your point of flipping it upside down is a great way not only to not distract yourself, but it also shows the other person that you're not
I'm here.
Yeah. So it's phones, and some of the digital watches do the same thing. If you've ever sat with someone who's constantly looking at their watch because of the notifications, it's just something else to think about, and for us to be more in control and a little bit more mindful about how we choose to use our devices. They're great in many things, but we also want to make sure that we're choosing times to step away from them.
It's Dr. Jo Lukens there talking with us about the idea of brain rot with those screens. And I always think it's funny when people have those smartwatches. Sometimes you just see them hitting their hands, I guess because it stops the notification and hides it away. But it always just looks a bit interesting when people keep hitting their hands. Andrew has sent a text through saying, I think we would all like to throw our technology in the bin. Some more than others, I reckon, Andrew. Some are a little bit glued to it. It is just a few moments away from your 10 o'clock ABC News.